be darned if I can get this microphone stand to cooperate this morning. Hi, welcome. It's day 2 of the 69th annual Willa Cather Spring Conference, and today is our Scholarship Award ceremony. So thank you for coming to support students who demonstrated excellence in writing about Willa Cather and their successes as students. The National Willa Cather Center is pleased to administer 5 scholarship programs: the Norma Ross Walter Scholarship, Antonia Scholarship, Antoinette Willa Scupa Turner Scholarship, the Leslie A. and Helen R. Wilson Memorial Scholarship, and the National Willa Cather Center Scholarship. And before we invite our scholarship winners, or 2 of them this morning, to receive, or 4 of them rather, to receive their awards, and 2 of them will share their essays, I have a word about the supporters whose generosity has made these awards a cornerstone of our educational mission. Norma Ross Walter was a Navy WAVE during the Second World War and a career newspaper editor in California. A lover of Cather and frequent visitor to Red Cloud, she was also unflappable in her belief that young women are entitled to education. She left a bequest to the National Willa Cather Center to fund a scholarship program in perpetuity, and the first scholarship was awarded in 1987. Antoinette Willa Scupa Turner magnanimously established 2 scholarship programs. She was the granddaughter of John and Anna Pavelka, prototypes for Anton Rossicki and Antonia Shimerda in Cather's short story Neighbor Rossicki and her novel My Antonia, respectively. Antoinette spent decades telling Anna's story and supporting our organization's educational mission. The first Antoinette Willa Scupa Turner Scholarship, named in her honor, was awarded in 2013, and the Antonia Scholarship was first awarded in 2018 as we celebrated the 100th publication anniversary of My Antonia. Antoinette's absence is felt today, but we're so glad her family is once again here to be part of this occasion. The Leslie A. and Helen R. Wilson, Leslie A. and Helen R. Wilson were strong advocates for education throughout their lives. Leslie farmed, and Helen was a teacher in Wilbur early on in her marriage, and she later became the principal at Innovale in the 1940s. Leslie also taught and worked for the Soil Conservation Service when called upon, in addition to farming. Each year, their scholarship supports a Webster County student planning a career in secondary education or agriculture. The National Willa Cather Center Scholarship was established in 2023 through voluntary contributions by our Board of Governors to support a graduate of the local high school. Cather herself was a graduate of Red Cloud High School. While she never returned to live here permanently after college, we hope recipients of this award will maintain a lifelong interest and appreciation for their hometown, just as Cather did. In total, our programs have enabled the Willa Cather Foundation to invest nearly $215,000 for students who are furthering their education as English or history majors. To begin our presentation, I'd like you to join me in welcoming our first winners, the Norma Ross Walter Scholarships. So this morning, we'll begin with our first place Norma Ross Walter Scholarship recipient, Miranda Davis. Miranda is from Firth and graduated from Norris High School. She will continue her education at the University of Iowa. In her application, Miranda wrote, quote, "I've surrounded my life with words and have developed a passion for telling stories that other people cannot. I remember the feeling when I discovered my favorite poems or books, and I long to be the writer of that poem or book for someone else. Nothing brings me as much jubilation and comfort as bringing my own thoughts and words to life." Now, these are very fortuitous words because in April, Miranda became the 2024 Nebraska Youth Poet Laureate. So she's definitely making true on her word in her essay. And you can also see Miranda's talents on display as the Nebraska Youth Poet Laureate. tomorrow at the Willa Cather Childhood Home Dedication Ceremony, where she will read an original poem for the occasion. So I'm going to turn this podium over to Miranda, and she's going to read her essay for you. It's titled A Tale as Old as Time. Thank you.
The loss of innocence in a young woman is a rite of passage. Oftentimes, however, it comes with a severe price to pay and an emotional toll that lasts a lifetime. In Willa Cather's infamous 11th novel, Lucy Gayheart, the title character and female protagonist faces a notable shift in her life, following the corruption by a man presumably twice her age. Although the novel received a poor reputation following its publication, the story remains true throughout history. As I read the book for the first time, I couldn't help but compare it to the classic Greek myth of Persephone. A young, susceptible woman leaves her simple home for the chance of something greater, only for someone she thought she loved to become her downfall. The parallels between Lucy and Persephone point out a common motif that is seen all throughout the world even today. As girls grow into women, they often come face to face with a life-changing conflict that alters how they perceive the world. As Lucy left her simple home at 18 to pursue her goals in the big city, she lost sight of her dream as a musician for older Sebastian's love, only to return to her isolated small town, which ultimately led to her death. Lucy's sacrifice of her career for love is described by Cather as, quote, a discovery about life, a revelation of love as a tragic force, not a melting mood, a passion that drowns like black water. I marked this quote profusely in my personal copy of the book, making note of how she uses the simile of drowning to foreshadow Lucy's later loss. One could draw the conclusion that her death ultimately came sooner than that fateful scene on the Platte River. Perhaps she lost part of herself when she went to Chicago and met Sebastian. She gave up her passion for the chance at love with a forbidden person. But he changed who Lucy was at her core. If she hadn't lost sight, maybe she'd have never come back to the place of her death. In comparison, Persephone was taken from her home on Olympus, where she was next in line for the throne, only to be sent to make a deal with the devil under the expectation of being queen and finding her own success. However, her youth and impressionability were taken advantage of, and she was never the same. Today, so many girls and women renounce their pride, their purity, and their opportunities to advance in their careers or society. However, the loss of innocence comes in more than one form. Sometimes it's not by choice. When I was 11 years old, I moved 2 hours away from my home to a small town of 600 over the holiday season during my 6th grade year. I took the opportunity of a brand new community to try and reinvent myself. However, in the process, I lost myself. I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who I was disgusted by and ashamed of when I looked in the mirror. Trying to be too mature for my age caught up to me, and suddenly I never felt so alone. I got lost in other people's narratives of who I should be. The opportunity to feel special or desired or unique seemed to justify the means to which I went to, but in reality it left me off worse than I'd ever felt before. Willa Cather went through a similar process in her move from Red Cloud, Nebraska to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, reinventing herself career-wise and personally, regardless of her past. The changes were going in the direction of becoming more herself. The first time I heard about Lucy Gayheart, I was 15. I was exhilarated to find a story that is so closely related to my own. A young girl from small-town Nebraska wanting to pursue her dreams in the big city, only to have them interrupted by someone else. She lost herself and eventually was deterred from the life she wanted to have, all for the desire to be loved. I know exactly how that feels. My mother knows exactly how that feels, and Willa Cather knew exactly how that felt. She once wrote of her forbidden relationship with longtime partner Edith Lewis. One realizes that human relationships are the tragic necessity of human life, that they can never be wholly satisfactory, that every ego is half the time greedily seeking them and half the time pulling away from them. The truest devastation of all is how we want nothing more than to love and be loved, but that normally leads to our demise. And unfortunately, love often comes with a steep sacrifice, the loss of one's innocence. Lucy's period of significant growth follows her moving to Chicago in pursuit of her dreams to be a musician. She describes the city as a, quote, place where so many memories and sensations were piled up, where a window or a doorway or a street corner with a magical meaning might flash at any moment out of the fog. Lucy, being young, impressionable, and increasingly in awe of city life after a lonely childhood in the Nebraska prairie, falls for Sebastian. Sebastian's character represents all that Chicago is to Lucy: larger than life, powerful, unattainable, of fantasy. His career and persona are part of what Lucy has always dreamed of, and when she gets the opportunity to chase that, she leaps at the chance. However, she let her heart speak louder than her head and lost track of what really mattered. At her core, Lucy is the prairie, hopeful, vulnerable, traditional, and has the potential to be so much more than what it is. When she returned to Nebraska, it was only a matter of time before she fell apart. Lucy's estrangement from her hometown only sparked a further downfall in her character. Cather details the experience in the novel, quote, "What's a man's hometown anyway, but the place where he has had disappointments and has learned to bear them?" She was alone again without her father or sister and heartbroken over the loss of Sebastian. Haverford, Nebraska only reminded her of everything she once had in her life and what she really wanted. Yet even as she returned to her roots, she still chased after a love that later derailed her life beyond repair. Just as Sebastian pushes Lucy further from her desired path, her childhood friend and partner Harry pulls her away from her dream in Chicago. Even though she refuses to his desire to marry her, her ruin comes from when he allows her to drown on the Platte after his ultimate rejection. Lucy's demise comes from the connection she had to her home. Cather became a well-known author because of the numerous books she published relating to life on the prairie. Lucy Gayheart was one of her least acknowledgeable writings because it strayed from the typical for Cather. Rather than write of a simple Midwestern tale, she expanded her genre to include romance, art, and city life that amounted into a tragedy about love and loss. The powerful novel changed the narrative for Cather, and just as she paved the way for literature and futures, Lucy herself created an untread path for young women everywhere who want to pursue their dreams. Although extreme, they face unforeseen obstacles. She is the typical, the atypical, and everything in between. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. And as a token of our happiness about your essay and your success, we have a certificate and scholarly edition of Lucy Gayheart for you. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to hear an essay from Emma Rasmussen. Emma is from Cambridge and graduated from Cambridge High School. She plans to attend Wayne State this fall. Of her future career as a teacher, she said, in recent years, I envied the people, or as an English major, I'm sorry. She said, in recent years, I envied the people who knew they had found their calling. When I tried to imagine my future, nothing appeared. As I lay awake in bed one night contemplating this, I made a momentous realization. The one thing I knew I loved was English. And Emma's going to read her essay this morning called Through the Eyes of a Burden.
Yes, thank you. Nothing makes me feel smaller than standing over the rolling hills and valleys near my hometown. In those moments, I realize that I am only a small part of the grand scheme of this world. I also think about the millions of other small pieces and people who came before me and made their living on this land too. I think of stories much like Antonia Schmierda's. In her novel, My Antonia, Willa Cather paints a stunning picture of strength and resilience through an awe-inspiring girl who faced unfathomable hardship and fought for everything she earned. This remarkable story, however, is told through the eyes of her childhood best friend, Jim Burden. The telling of Antonia's story through Jim's point of view tremendously affects the story's emotion and offers a unique perspective on the series of events. Readers only see Antonia through Jim's perspective. They do not experience Antonia's feelings firsthand. The dynamic of their relationship as they mature plays a monumental role in his retelling. When Jim first meets Antonia, he sees a pretty brown-eyed girl
with tan skin and a thick bohemian accent. But even as strangers, they run and play together as kids often do. It does not take long before the two become familiar. Just pages after their first introduction, Antonia becomes Tony, a nickname that sticks for the rest of their lives. Jim teaches Antonia English, and her heavy accent begins to fade. Through their time together, Antonia develops a mothering role with Jim, the first of many dynamics in their relationship. Given their age gap, Antonia cares for Jim in a, quote, protective manner. In typical boy fashion, Jim despises the superior tone she uses. He desperately wants to be her equal instead of a little boy, or worse, a little brother. He wants to be a man. Luckily for Jim, he gets a chance to heroically save Antonia from a rattlesnake, securing his manly status in Antonia's eyes. The first test in Jim and Antonia's relationship comes after the death of Mr. Schmierda. Initially, Antonia relies on her only friend to cope with his death. As she clings to Jim, he recalls being able to feel her heart breaking. Jim, who had moved to Nebraska after losing his own parents, expresses little sympathy towards Antonia in his retelling. Maybe he aimed to keep his story focused on the events surrounding Antonia's life, or perhaps the trauma that Jim had experienced from his parents' death made him incapable of voicing his sympathy for his own friend. Jim does not describe many of Antonia's emotions, but rather the motions she went through during her father's funeral. If the story were being told through the perspective of another character, or Antonia herself, readers would experience a whole new narrative of her emotions and the thoughts behind her actions. As time marches on for the Burton and Schmierda families, each deals with their grief differently. Antonia throws herself wholeheartedly into her work. She has no intentions of being a lady or wanting to learn. Instead, she wants to outplow everyone she knows and become just as tough as her brother. Jim comments that she, quote, could talk of nothing but the prices of things or how much she could lift and endure. This is Antonia's way of dealing with the grief of her father. On the inside, she feels weak for the feelings and emotions that go along with losing a loved one, and so externally, she portrays an overly forceful and egotistical version of herself. She exclaims, quote, I care not that your grandmother say that working outdoors makes me like a man. I like to be like a man. During this phase, Jim becomes slightly irritated with Antonia. He does not appreciate her newfound strength or her swagger. When he approaches her about it, she reminds him that her life will never be easy, something that Jim had not considered. Though they were both growing up on the Nebraska plains, they lived extremely different lives. Jim's irritation towards Antonia begins to subside when they both move to town in later years. Antonia's grief begins to lessen, and she attempts to reconstruct the bridges that she had burned, telling Jim and his grandparents, quote, maybe I be the kind of girl you like better now that I come to town. This conversation shows the growth of her character in two ways. First, it shows that she cares about the way that people perceive her. After her father's suicide, other people's opinions were the least of her worries. She was strong and did not need anyone else. It also shows her maturing into a young woman, many of whom are self-conscious and want others to like them. It also shows her Americanization. The bohemian she once spoke constantly has almost entirely been replaced by the fragmented English Jim taught her. Antonia's accent symbolizes her desire to fit in with her new country. During her time with the Harlings, her accent fades subtly enough that readers do not notice its disappearance. Even strong-willed and stubborn Antonia desperately wants to fit in with her peers. Hiding her accent is an easy way to do so. Readers see Antonia's growth first, but Jim grows into a young man after his move to town. Jim and Antonia's relationship takes on a new dynamic as they mature. As they develop from children to young adults, they experience the feelings that come with that maturity. Suddenly, Jim sees girls in a new light, especially the girl he grew up with. After growing apart for a few years, Jim and Antonia reunite closer than ever. After seeing Blind Yarnall perform, Jim remembers they were, quote, so excited that they dreaded going to bed. We lingered a long time at the Harling Gate, whispering in the cold until the restlessness was slowly chilled out of us. While the two are the closest of friends, Jim wishes for more. During the night spent dancing at the Vonnies' tent, he pines for Antonia's attention and envies the other boys who look in her direction. Antonia's whole life revolves around her nights spent dancing and does not seem to reciprocate Jim's feelings. In certain instances, though, readers question whether or not Antonia feels the same way. After walking Antonia back to the Cutter house, Jim kisses her goodnight. However, the kiss Jim intends and the kiss Antonia expects are vastly different. Afterward, she scolds him, but it also appears jealous when he retorts that Lena Lingard lets him kiss her like that. The misunderstanding leads to Jim confessing that he does not, quote, care anything about the other girls. He loves Antonia and Antonia only, but knows that she will never feel the same, a sentiment that lasts throughout the rest of his retelling. Over the next decades, life causes both physical and relational distance between Jim and Antonia. Antonia's life did not unfold as she expected it to. She never planned to be left at the altar pregnant with her fiancé's child. While many would hide away in their shame, Antonia did quite the opposite. She was proud of her daughter and raised her as such. Once reunited 20 years later, Jim sees the girl he grew alongside, the young lady he loved, and the strong, grown woman Antonia became. After marrying Anton Cusack, mothering their 11 children, and creating a home fit for them all, Antonia stands tall, battered but not diminished. Antonia is strong and sure of herself and has returned to speaking her native language, passing it down to her children. Though she tried desperately to fit in with the townspeople by speaking English, Antonia ultimately reverts back to Bohemian, her true self. She is completely satisfied with the life she has created. In her eyes, every hardship, trial, and tribulation was worth it to bring her back home to her farm and her family. My Antonia is a powerful showing of adversity-building character. Antonia faces no shortage of heartache, yet it never touches her spirit. Her strength is one of many characteristics Jim Burton admires. Jim's narration offers a unique perspective on Antonia's story, adding a level of emotion and nostalgia only a best friend could. Cather's use of Jim makes My Antonia stand out among other novels and cements itself in readers' minds for centuries to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And we have a copy of My Antonia for you. All right, our next scholarship winner was unable to be here with us this morning, although she really tried. She was traveling all the way from Virginia, and some unfortunate circumstances prevented her from finishing her trip. However, we do have a video recording of her essay that she so graciously submitted at the very last minute yesterday evening. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Eleanor Buchanan, our Antonia Scholarship winner. Eleanor resides in Crozet, Virginia. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And she is a graduate of Western Albemarle High School. She's unable to join us, but we can watch her essay this morning, and you can also watch it on Whova. And her essay is called One Man, Many Lenses, The Characterization of Anton Rossicki. And so I'll get that queued up for you.
One Man, Many Lenses, The Characterization of Anton Rossicki. Almost a century after its publication, Willa Cather's 1930 short story, Neighbor Rossicki, remains a defining work of American literature, renowned for its portrayal of frontier life in the rural Midwest. Rooted in Cather's personal experience growing up among Bohemian immigrants in Nebraska, her omniscient narration style in Neighbor Rossicki bypasses the need for exposition and history, instead focusing on Rossicki's characterization and the greater theme of community that he embodies. Anton Rossicki is a relatable everyman who transcends cultural boundaries and speaks to readers of all backgrounds. Cather creates a character who is instantly likable, a feat achievable because of the unique way in which she depicts him. Her stylistic choice distinguishes this work from its literary counterparts and endears Rossicki to any audience. The reader's first introduction to the titular character comes through the eyes of tertiary characters such as Dr. Ed, whose narration provides a critical insight into Rossicki's personality and their relationship. While enjoying breakfast at their table, Dr. Ed observes that people as generous and warm-hearted and affectionate as the Rossickis never got ahead much. Maybe you couldn't enjoy your life and put it in the bank too. expositing on the happiness permitted by their indulgent lifestyle. Dr. Ed's fondness for the Rozagis permeates his narration, allowing the reader to understand the family and its patriarch from the perspective of a close friend. In doing so, Cather eliminates the backstory required to build the reader's view of the characters. Instead, we adopt the same warm opinions of him as his friends. In a story focused on the external perception of the main character, this rapid but in-depth character development is crucial to the reader's understanding of the familial and platonic dynamics that define Cather's work. More importantly, the Rozagis' jovial constitution lent itself to the strong sense of community prevalent in the scene. By accessing Dr. Ed's perspective, Cather integrates the reader into the established dynamic. Cather further expounds on Rozagis' character in the scene at the farm implement store, when Pearl, one of the employees, comments on his tendency to buy his wife candy. However fleeting, the exchange between the two immediately clues readers into the personality of Rozagi without deliberately stating such traits. Cather deftly employs multiple points of view here by placing the scene in Rozagi's perspective. Because the reader is in his thoughts rather than Pearl's, the comment shows rather than tells the reader about his generosity. Cather trusts her audience to put together the pieces she has laid before them. It is challenging to fully flesh out the protagonist of any short story, but Cather does so with ease. Ultimately, the success is due to the omniscient point of view, which allows her to use multiple points of view to tell the story. In building her protagonist from external perspectives, Cather bypasses both a common literary faux pas and conventional storytelling method, without sacrificing reader understanding. Throughout Neighbor Rozagi, the rocky, hesitant dynamic between Rozagi and Polly gives way to one of deep familial love that encapsulates the core values of true community. When she is introduced, Polly is skittish around Rozagi, whereas the cast so far has been warm. Despite how close he is to Rudy, her husband and his eldest son, she is unable to connect with him on a deeper level. Because of their different backgrounds, Polly is constantly wary around her father-in-law, a caution that manifests itself in the austere respect she shows him. Rather than address him as father, she chooses to call him Mr. Rozagi. Rudy observes she is afraid of something about him. In comparison, Rozagi dotes on Polly. He gives Rudy money to take her out when she appears melancholy, allows her to use the car instead of his son's, and plans carpentry projects to cheer her up. The time he takes to improve their relationship, described by his wife, himself, and Rudy, expands on the same generosity previously noted by Dr. Ed and Pearl. Cather's choice to use omniscient narration to tell the story enables the reader to benefit from information they otherwise would not be privy to, ultimately gaining a greater understanding of both Rozagi and the significance he places upon family and community. The emotional impact of his love for his community comes not only from his actions, but also from the reactions of those around him. And utilizing the opinions of the recipients of Rozagi's care and attention, Cather strengthens readers' connection with the protagonist. Moreover, as Rozagi's health worsens, his relationship with Polly develops into a bond of genuine familial love. When Rozagi collapses during a visit to his son's house, he shares an intimate moment with his daughter-in-law that sharply contrasts the rigidity of their interactions up to that point. Polly's concern for Rozagi's health surpasses her previous apprehension, and she realizes that nobody in the world, not her mother, not Rudolph, or anyone, really loves her as much as old Rozagi does. It is as if Rozagi has a special gift for loving people, something like an ear for music or an eye for color. Polly's revelation is crucial to the reader's view of Rozagi and the community he has created. The sudden onslaught of appreciation for her father-in-law accentuates the importance of spending time with family while you can. Cather brilliantly portrays this transition in a brief time, relying on the conceptions of Rozagi that she has established to convey every angle of their complex relationship. The reader's awareness of Rozagi's perspective amplifies the significance of the moment. Without the context of his thoughts, the levity of the scene is lost. Had she chosen limited narration, Cather could not have executed her vision. In straying from literary precedent, she gave voice to an unlikely kinship that formed the emotional core of Neighbor Rozagi. Fittingly, Rozagi spends the twilight of his life with his family, cultivating the close-knit community Cather has accentuated. He compliments his wife's coffee and mends his son's overalls, highlighting the generous nature for which he is known. Cather narrates Rozagi's death from his point of view to convey the peaceful nature of the moment, which she had previously done sparingly. After he's passed, the focus of the story returns to his loved ones and the grief they are experiencing. With his death, Cather switches back to her favored omniscient style, forcing readers to experience the melancholic grief felt by those whose lives he affected. She describes the resignation of his wife, Mary, and the regret of Dr. Ed at being absent when he was needed most. And spending the final moments of the story with Rozicky's clan, Cather brings the theme of community full circle and tugs on the heartstrings of her audience. Dr. Ed feels Rozicky's life is complete and beautiful, and so too does the reader. The omniscient narration of Neighbor Rozicky allows author Willa Cather to develop her main character in a short amount of time without sacrificing the beauty of her writing. While critical to Rozicky's characterization, this choice is most significant to the reader, who becomes a member of his inner circle by seeing him through the eyes of his loved ones. The love he kindles in his family and friends establishes a crucial relationship for the reader, whose only knowledge of Rozicky comes from the narrator's perspective which they share. Without the omniscient narration, the point of the story would be moot. The theme of community translates because the various narrators convey it. Ultimately, Cather's bold narrative choice diverges not only from literary norms, but also from the self-serving message westward expansion inspired. Amidst hundreds of thousands of Americans attempting to make new lives for themselves, Cather depicts a flourishing community that relies on one another for support through difficult times. She rejects popular ideals in favor of her belief in the centrality of family as the building block of society, a novel concept in a country founded on a philosophy of individualism. Thank you.
Thank you for that brief pause in programming while I turn the projector off. Okay, our Antoinette Willis Scupa Turner Scholarship winner was also unable to join us, and her name is Cadence Schleicher, and she is a recent graduate from Gering High School in Gering, Nebraska. She plans to major in both English and business. And Cadence is described by her social sciences teacher as having a, quote, wonderful combination of grit and the belief that she can always improve, qualities both rare and important in a high school student. And her essay, Cadence didn't submit a video, but her essay was called Humanity on a Page. So thank you to Cadence for submitting such a lovely essay. And at this time, since we have a little moment here, I want to just acknowledge our scholarship coordinator, Virgil Albertini, who was unable to join us at the last minute. So thank you to Virgil for all he does to organize our scholarship program, talk with scholarship winners and our reading committee. Virgil's really an asset, and we couldn't do our scholarship program without him. So thank you. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that we have a member of our committee, Carol Duncan, in the audience this morning. So thank you, Carol, for joining. She's giving the parade wave. And we also have some Antoinette Turner relatives joining us today as well. Her daughter, Alana, and her husband, Ron, are here. And her granddaughter, Anna Taylor, is here. We also have Steve Scupa here joining us. Thank you for being here to hear the scholarship presentations. And now, in past years, Anna, you've come up here and given some remarks. I don't know if you want to this morning. We have a moment, but you don't have to. You're good? Okay. Here she comes. I don't mean to put her on the spot, but I always think it's special to have a member of Antoinette's family address the crowd.
Just wanted to make a comment on behalf of my grandma, Antoinette Willa Scupa Turner, that the corals that I'm wearing were given to my grandma. They were actually sent to her when my grandma was a little child from Willa Cather, who lived, grandma said she lived in New York at the time. And grandma lived by Camel, Nebraska, here in Webster County. And she tells the story that when she was a little girl, maybe about 6 years old, that she found this green celluloid box. And in it were these beautiful corals and or a necklace. And she wanted to play with them, but her mother said, "Antoinette, you put those corals back because those are special. Those are sent from Willa Cather in New York City, so you can't play with them." But Grandma opened up the box and closed it, and the box broke, and it's I don't know, it's gone. But the corals are still here, and it just is a great remembrance of Grandma's love of telling the story of her grandmother, Anna Pavelka, who was the prototype for my Antonia. So, and it was Grandma's hope and love that she would continue to pass the story and the love of her grandmother, of her grandfather, who was neighbor Rozicki, on to other generations. And that's why she established the 2 scholarships that she did. So anyway, just thank you for letting me share, and we appreciate all of you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Anna. Well, now I have 2 more scholarship winners to brag about up here to you all, and then we'll have some time for questions from our winners this morning. The next recipient that I want to tell you about is our winner of the Leslie A. and Helen R. Wilson Memorial Scholarship. And as you remember, this is the scholarship awarded to a Webster County High School senior that's going to study something involving secondary education or agriculture. And this year, our winner was Libby Macklin. Libby was the valedictorian of her class at Blue Hill High School. She plans to attend the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where she will major in ag communications and environmental science. A 2023 Nebraska School Activities Association Believers and Achievers Award recipient, Libby explained in her scholarship essay that, quote, "Behind the title of Believer and Achiever, I am a hardworking senior girl who is ambitious and isn't afraid to push myself to try new things. I am a student who is curious. I am a girl who is passionate and wants to leave the world a better place than when I found it." After hearing Libby's description of herself, it should surprise no one to hear that she is also a descendant of Anna Pavelka. So congratulations, Libby, on your award. And finally, I want to tell you about our National Willa Cather Center Scholarship winner. This year, the award went to Avery Fangmeyer. Avery graduated from Red Cloud High School in May, and this fall she will attend Doane University, where she plans to study elementary and special education. And I could read you her list of other scholarship awards, but we would be here for a while. It's pretty long. In her scholarship essay, Avery writes, "Any lifelong Red Cloud resident, such as myself, has had Willa Cather influence their life. Willa Cather has provided so much to the little town of Red Cloud, resulting in a thriving and prosperous community. Because of Cather, Red Cloud can offer many opportunities other small towns cannot, such as book readings, art displays, and many other cultural events in our spectacular opera house." So I want to thank Avery for seeing the work that we do and offering her appreciation. And congratulations, Avery. Now we have some time for questions. So my associate Sophie is going to come around with a microphone. If you could raise your hand if you'd like to ask our winners this year any questions, this is the time to do so.
I'm curious how you were introduced to Willa Cather. Is it included in your school curriculum, her books?
Yes, we read O Pioneer as a sophomore in high school with my English teacher, and then my family has a bunch of land around Red Cloud because they farm, and I drive by and see all of the different Willa Cather like pastures and all of the different things that she talked about in O Pioneer.
Blue Hill, unfortunately does not have it in their curriculum. I wish it did. But because of my personal connection and relation to Antonia, I've gotten to learn about her and Willa Cather from that. So I'm grateful for that experience.
I was exposed to Willa Cather through my English curriculum, and my English teacher who read my Antonia to my class is actually here today. So. My school did not have a Willa Cather curriculum, but when I was in 3rd grade, I did a research project on any famous Nebraskan, and I chose Willa Cather, and that was how I was introduced. And so my entire life, I've just been reading her works and been fascinated by it.
I'll ask a question. I know some of you didn't see the documentary film last night that premiered at the Opera House, but I know one of you, I think, did. And I think any of you can answer this question, whoever would like to. I'm curious, there was a lot in the documentary last night about Cather's sort of desire to strike out on her own and maybe leave her home, although she was deeply inspired by where she grew up and this place that we're in today. I wonder if any or all of you might talk about whether or not you relate to Cather or how you think about your future plans in relation to your home, and if you feel a desire to sort of to strike out and go somewhere far away or come back at some point, or if you could just talk a little bit about your future plans and how they may mirror Cather's own life.
I plan to go to Doane and then come back to hopefully Red Cloud or a small rural town, so then I don't have to live in the big city because I've never enjoyed living in the big city.
I've been a resident of Webster County for my whole life, so this place has a special place in my heart. So I'm a little apprehensive about leaving my home and community to go to Lincoln, since that's obviously a lot bigger. Kind of have similar feelings to Avery. But I do have an inborn fondness in my community, and I know that I can always come back to my community in Webster County, and I'll always have a support system here. So although a little apprehensive, I am ready to, I guess, strike out like Willa Cather, just knowing I have that support system back here.
In the fall, I will be 5 hours away from my hometown, which I guess you could say is striking out on my own. And I'm not really sure where I'm going to end up as of right now, but I think I will always be a small town Nebraska girl at heart. When I was applying for colleges, my go-to was New York and Boston. I got into a school in Boston, but because of financial situations, I just wasn't able to go. But still, I'm going to Iowa. I'm getting out of the state, and I've always wanted to strike out on my own and explore life beyond Nebraska, but I lived in a small town for years, and it's always going to be a part of me, I think.
Are there other questions from the audience? Oh, I see a hand up in the back.
This is really a comment, not a question, but I thought all three of the Cather essays were just wonderful. I so enjoyed hearing them. And it is so amazing to see Cather's continued relevance and these new insights into Cather. So I just thought all three of the essays were terrific, and I'm really grateful to all of you for sharing them. So thank you.
You might talk to us a minute, if you can, about whether your reading in general and reading of Cather in particular is more or less a solitary thing you do or a communal thing you do. Do you talk about books with your parents, your friends, people like that, or is it more a go to your room and read and escape? And what do other people think? Like, do they make fun of you for reading Willa Cather and you're from a small town in Nebraska, or are they, excited about that?
Reading for me is very much a solitary act, although I share my books with my mother and my grandmother, and we read all together. But I don't know if I've ever been made fun of for reading Willa Cather, but reading has definitely not always been a very popular pastime for me. And going into being an English major, everyone is always very shocked about that. So I don't know. It's very solitary for me, but I do share my books with friends and especially family members.
A lot of the times when I tell my friends that I've started a new book, I'm like, do you want to hear about it? They roll their eyes, and I take that as a no. So I would say that, I read My Antonia as a class, and then my mom read it, so she could be a part of the festivities today. And we did get to talk about it a little bit, but I would say for the most part that reading is a solitary activity for me.
I would second what they both say. I think reading is a solitary activity for me as well. But this summer, I'm hoping, my mom, we need to get this in the act, to do a My Antonia book club with some family friends and a couple of my little sisters. I'm hoping we can read it all together over the summer, so we need to get that going.
I would also agree with all of them that I read and it's a solitary act for me. But with reading Willa Cather in school, a lot of my classmates and friends also had to read it, so they never made fun of me for reading it.
Safety in numbers. Also, Libby, I may know someone who could provide some extra resources for your My Antonia book club. I think there's a question over here.
Yeah.
Oh, Kelsey.
So a lot of us are readers in the room, and I know that I'm an English professor, and so sometimes people get intimidated talking about books with me. I'm like, no, tell me all of your book recommendations. One time I had a person who was like, I'm really into Amish romance books. I'm like, tell me more about this. And so I'm wondering if you have anything that you've read recently that you really enjoyed. It doesn't matter the genre, doesn't matter even if it's young adult, little kid, adult. Do you have any recommendations of books that you've read recently and liked?
I do not have any recommendations for you.
That's tricky. I've read a lot of books over my life, but I was just on a vacation earlier, so I was reading a lot, and one of the ones I'm still reading right now is All the Small Things. It's been pretty good so far, so there's that one, but I haven't finished it yet, so yeah.
I worked in a library last summer, and anytime somebody asked for a book recommendation, I pointed them to Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan, I think. I always recommend my personal favorite book, which is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. It's fairly recent, but she's nodding her head. She's read it, but it's very good. So that's always what I recommend.
I would just say that it's so refreshing to hear these young women. This is always one of my favorite parts of the conference. But we never hear anymore eventually like what happens to you. And I would just beg you to put spring conference on your calendars and come back. I mean, if you want a supportive environment of people that care like you do about Cather, this is it. And we'd love to hear about you and where you're going. So
I had a question. Willa Cather thought she was going to be a doctor, when she was about your age, and then she changed her mind. So I'm sort of interested in your thought processes in terms of determining a major for your next steps. What things were you considering and what things are you open to?
I always thought I was going to go into psychology and be a therapist, but part of my life, I've always written, I've always been a writer, and I didn't really decide that was what I was going to 100% do with my life until the past couple of years. But I'm still considering majoring or minoring in psychology or philosophy or sociology, something along those aspects, because I want to explore different aspects of the world so I can add that to my writing and learn more about that.
This fall, I'm majoring in English and minoring in pre-law, and my end goal is a lawyer. I've had some recent life experiences, and I feel like law is where I need to be.
It's funny you should ask. I definitely struggled with that question a lot. My mom is a physical therapist. My dad is an engineer, and I knew I wanted to learn more. I have a passion for learning, and so I knew college was in the picture for me. As for what, it took me a little while to realize, but growing up in rural Nebraska, agriculture has always been a big part of my life. And it just clicked one day that, hey, there is something for me in agriculture. And that's kind of how I landed with that. It's always been there, but I just never realized it before. So I plan to go to UNL this fall and major in ag comm and environmental science. And I'm happy to explore those areas and find a more specific career path next year.
I've always been dead set on being a teacher since I was really little, and I grew up with many teachers in my family. My dad is a teacher here in town, and my aunt is a teacher in town. And since I was in first grade, I've always wanted to be a teacher.
I think if we have time for maybe one more question, if there is one. But if not, I want to thank our scholarship winners for joining us this morning. As Sharon mentioned, it's always such a treat to hear from young writers and young readers. So thank you for attending this morning's session. And I'm sorry to tell you that if you are a scholarship winner or you do this every year with us, I'll need you to meet me for photographs just outside the Opera House auditorium. We'll be as quick as we can. The next session starts at 10:30, and that is called Adapting Neighbor Rossicki. So that is a session about adapting that short story into a one-act play for student performers. So you can join us here for that at 10:30, or there is a concurrent session at the Burlington Depot. There is a writers workshop with Anna McCracken, who is the founder of the Ames Writers Collective. So she's going to lead a writers workshop based on prompts that are inspired by Cather's collection, Obscure Destinies. So you can join her at the Depot if that's your cup of tea this morning. So thank you very much for coming to this scholarship awards ceremony. Oh, Glenda? Well, that is so nice of you to ask. Yes, please. So, yes, I think we have plenty of time to do that. So if you can hang tight, and then you can descend. Okay. Thank you so much.